Okay.
Yeah, so just a little bit from the background. So you will hear not only theoretical part today, but also some practical, because I'm also working as a mediator and dialogue facilitator, and especially on interreligious affairs and intra-religious groups. So you will hear different perspectives on how does it work on the ground in Ukraine, and I also worked in different contexts like Armenia, Georgia, and other parts. So, Father, I will try to enter from my laptop. Okay, so it should work. Just a minute. Yeah, can you hear me? It's fine. Uh,
Should I stop my sharing?
uh, Try just now to check
Okay.
whether I can share. Sorry for this. It's always something interesting. Okay, so yeah, I'll just open my presentation. So if you have any kind of questions in between of our work, something on a practical behalf, or any kind of specific terms you would like to understand on how did it work, how it didn't work, please feel free to ask me because I would be happy to share and also all the practical details where that is possible. Okay, so it seems like we're back. Yes, you can see
Mhm.
it finally. So we will start with interesting picture and your suggestions. What do you see here? And what precisely do you see? You can see the different size of the bubbles, why it's so. So your suggestions and associations. And please, you can unmute yourself and just add your ideas or put it in the chat. I will try to check it. Yeah, Oksana, please.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a physical phenomena to electrons clashing against each other, which probably metaphorically can symbolize the polarization like minus and plus.
Oh, it can be.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Actually, when I asked our communication specialist yesterday to draw, because I draw it from my hand, and she said like, is it like more physics or something like that? But it's more from conflict studies, but sometimes it's really connected to the physics, just not to keep the intrigue. So that's a typical practical explanation drawing of polarization effect. And that's a picture of group dynamics. So here you can see, yeah, please. I can see Notre Dame Girls School, but I don't know your name, please.
Okay, I was about saying it's between two groups, one with the color of the blue and the red, with the
Yeah,
different effects on these two
yeah,
groups.
yeah. Thank you so much. And maybe you have suggestion what's on the top? What's that circle with two colors in it? Any ideas? Oksana?
Yeah, but it's interesting because I think that the input from the blue side is just okay, well, digitally measured. It's just one thing, one member, let's say, and on the red side we can see three members, whereas the result is
Mhm.
equal halves, which is
Yeah.
marvelous.
Yeah, so a little bit just to understand how the group dynamics work. So here you can see two bubbles. They can be different size, and here you can see almost the same size, but more members inside. All those little dots, those are all members. So you can see definitely the red group is bigger, and it's like, let's call it in democratic terms, majority. So this majority group. And on the blue side, we have minority groups, so less people are there. Colors identify the terms of identity of the groups, how they understand themselves. And it can be, for example, not only red and blue. It can be about racial, it can be religious, it can be cultural identity, it can be also political identity, like right wing, left wing, all types of markers of identity which you can imagine. Then, of course, this lightning in between them, that's about conflict and polarization. So they are not together, they are not connected, even though they are for example, discussing the same idea. And those circles, small ones, 3 from the red part and 1 from the blue, they are symbolizing a special people in each group. Because according to the old research, I mean mainly practical one on polarization, the effect of polarization doesn't help like the full group. Of course, you've got identity, for example, you are left-wing activist and you are, I don't know, communist, but it doesn't mean that you will be the person who actually agitate or make a propaganda for everyone to be separated from the others. But those people, 1 blue and 3 red, are those so-called polarizers. So those precise people who are actually create this identity that we, red people, are against blue people because of the color or something else. So they are the one who are taking you in the other direction from the other social group. And they create this color identity for those majority people there. And those people are precisely reminding, not only by creating, but they can remind if you get any kind of social events, political changes, anything, they remind you, don't forget that you are red, or don't forget that you are a citizen of such country, or you're a representative of some religious group. So you should keep your identity and you should separate yourself from the others. Then on the bottom of the drawing, you see those green dots. Those are the main neutral part of society, typically. Those people who can rather not have precise red or blue identity. They are different parts of society, but they can also be attracted by those groups and by those polarizers, those who are calling and saying, you are with us, you are against the other group, and you should join us. And that's precisely how they can move actually to one of the groups, or they can stay neutral. And sometimes, rarely, but sometimes you've got mainly youth representatives who are denying to be any part of identity of such polarized groups. And they're trying to be apolitical, anti-socialist sometimes, just to spend their life separately from the social political context. And of course, in terms of war and in terms of religious clashes, we can see those groups of people. But that precise big dot, a ball with blue and red inside on the up of the drawing, that's so-called people of bridges or bridge people. That can be a person who gets identity from both sides. Or, for example, that can be a son or a daughter, where father, for example, is a left-wing activist and mother right-wing activist. It's quite hard to imagine, but it can be like artificial example. But unfortunately, in terms of war, in terms of any kind of political changes, you've got all the types inside family conflicts. And you can see those people who can keep both identities. In terms of religion, for example, it can be a person whose father, for example, is Muslim and mother is Christian, and you've got some clashes on theological level, and this person keeps identity and connection with both those groups. And it can be not precise, this identity that I'm double or I don't want to be with rather of both groups. It can be, for example, Christian, but he or she wants to recover this social fabric of two groups and to see how they can live together and how they can transform the situation they've got. And more precise, if you do any kind of group analysis or conflict analysis, you can zoom out from the situation to see how big are those bubbles. Who are the people who are in those bubbles? How they call themselves? What are their messages? Like what they're telling other world? Like, for example, we are red people and we hate blue ones because we believe that only red and green or red and black should be the true colors, something like that. It's like an artificial example. But anyway, in terms to polarization effect, in terms to work, it should be some group which is united against some other group. So it requires proper identity, understanding of the goal, at least some parts, because sometimes you got people, for example, on the protests, and you ask them, why are you here? And they cannot explain so much because it was like a spirit or emotions why they came, but it's not so conscious for them to be polarized, separated from others. And then you've got some peace building possibilities by those people who keep both identities or who can be trusted by both parties, or who are just, for example, green people, but they see some opportunities how situation can be changed. And that's a rare option. And for example, if we are switching to sociology or political studies, the main focus would be also to find those small dots who are polarizers, who are actually creating this identity of being against the other, and how they imagine this other people and what they can do, how they can make harm, what's the fear standing behind it. And to keep more to talk with identity, because today we will talk with you not only about identity, but about overall conflict parts, about our needs, values, interests, position, how they are combined. Because as soon as you understand some different parts of identity, it helps you to clarify what actually conflict is about and how polarization works. But anyway, identity is not just who am I, but that's different parts. First of all, values, and especially for faith-based organizations, of course, and beliefs. They sometimes coincide, sometimes they're from different groups. And it's really good if, for example, you are entering church or mosque and you can ask anyone, what do you believe in? And especially what are those values you've got? And people can name them and even explain. Because, for example, in one of our interreligious groups, it was Muslim Christian, we've got one of the priests who was really actively commenting, and he said, and of course, we act according to Christian values. And then another imam in the group, he asked, what do you mean by Christian values? He said, of course, love, respect, honesty, being faithful. And Imam said, but for me, that's Muslim values. And I don't think that they only belong to Christianity. So values and beliefs are those categories which can be not only um, self-identified for some religious group, but also they create part of your identity. And of course, some core parts of identity can change, but beliefs and values are more stable than others because it's what you believe, and not only your faith in God and overall, but your belief that, I don't know, people are good, that you should trust people, or your belief that tomorrow will be better than today, that's also part of your identity. Then, of course, you've got more dynamic parts. Your bindings, by that I mean social connections, what part of the group, social group you are identified as, for example, university or your workplace, your family, your group of friends, your territorial community, any kind of. And they can change as well, but that's a part of your identity. As, for example, you name yourself, I'm Ukrainian, I'm from Kyiv. So that's part of my social bindings too. And sometimes they're geographical, but by naming city, I actually imagine people who are there for me. And also, there are even more dynamic parts as rituals. And sometimes I mean by rituals some parts of religious belief, but also that can be everyday rituals. Like, for example, you cannot start your day without a cup of coffee, and that's your everyday ritual. And if someone intervenes and someone doesn't help you in making coffee, or they say like you cannot make it like right here, part of your identity is actually damaged, and you can feel that you are irritated against someone just because it was a small part that touched in you. And the last one, which is used a lot by different educational system, religious and political, of course, that's emotionally significant experience. And it can be both negative and positive, but more important that you remember that and you remember emotions which you have. Like, for example, on the summer school, if you got one of the quotes or one of the stories which actually touched you, that means that you will remember that summer school is associated, for example, with warmness, of some participants, or precise wording and some special feelings you've got from one of the lectures. And all those 5 parts, they mix your identity, which is also dynamic. It can change, but there are some core parts as values and beliefs, which are almost impossible to change, except some really traumatic experience, like, for example, war or natural disaster. And switching more to polarization, we'll just read the chat. So this is especially interesting when it comes to the term Catholic, which is a highly ambivalent term that could mean either sectarian, like being part of the Roman Papal Church, or universal and all-embracing, which is the literal meaning of Catholic. Yes, precisely. And it's more interesting, Ashton, when you mean this group of people really well described by sociologist Grace Davy, that believing without belonging, and how people say, for example, I'm Christian, but I don't want to belong to any jurisdiction, or I want to be just Christian, or I want to be a side of the church because I'm spiritual but not religious. And those all effects we've got right now and the developments. And it's really interesting not to assume what people actually believe, but to ask them how they identify and why, for example, they choose to be Catholic in a different way. And coming here you can see the photo of one of the religious studies experts who was controversial because of his personal beliefs. But anyway, he made a great comparative religious studies. That's Mircea Eliade, who actually get a different light on a conflict. And as soon as he got this concept of profane, so everyday time, and sacred time, he said that conflict brings us to some sacred space of personal and group myths about the other. So when you got on those red and blue groups, which are polarized, they create their own myth that we are red people, we're only honest, we are all, faithful citizens, we're all members of one church, and we want to live in such a way. And they create this mythology and sometimes even rituals that, for example, if they gather together, they pray, they eat together, and as Father Roman mentioned, play football in the evening. It can be a small ritualistic building of the myths. And actually what I saw a lot in UKU campus, that people are engaged in a lot of group activities, which is a really special one, and it creates social beings, emotional significant experience, and it also feeding identity of being a member of the UKU community. But also when you are a part of conflict, you also taking part in this sacred space, because if you are in a real conflict, not like superficial one which someone trying you to put in, but you feel that you really get emotions, you are angry, you are irritated, you want to fight for something, or you don't agree with something, then it's already a created part of the myth why you are there and why it's important for you. That's one of the questions you can always ask you. Why I feel so, why it's so important for me, and it's so painful or positive. It depends on a type of emotions you've got. And here's the question for you. As soon as polarization is dealing with the group dynamics and group myth, here the concept of the other comes. So there are we, us, and there are some other people who are against us. So who can be the other for the church today? And church from capital C. Your suggestions. And you can unmute yourself and just say, because I typically don't see all of us. So who is the other? Yeah, please.
Yeah. The other is the unbeliever. Those who do not, believe in the same faith that we church.
So those people who don't believe in God or who are not part of church? Okay.
Yes, both.
Both.
Yes.
Because it can be people who believe in God, but they don't see themselves as a part of the church.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Non-believers? Other suggestions? It's not precisely like a conflict, it should be, but like when I even say, who is the other? Anna, please.
So in Catholicism, sometimes sometimes they say that the other is the other person next to us. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone against or just the other.
Yeah, just
Love,
someone.
love the other person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just your neighbor, for example, even in church on a mass. Thank
Exactly.
you. Yeah, thank you so much. Because yeah, Daniel will take your response and we'll move on. Please.
From where I'm sitting, when we refer to someone as other, is someone who doesn't share with the identity, someone who's a bit different from ourselves. If you can take it a notch higher, you can say someone who, of different color, different race, different background, and so on and so on. Social standing and so on and so on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Grace, please.
All right, I think you just said what I wanted to say. The other is someone with a different value, belief, maybe from different religion and tribe. Yeah, that's what I want to say. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm also reading some responses in the chat. It's also dependent on a history and sensitivity. And the other is the one with a diverse view. But the main difference, of course, that the other with a different view can be a kind of impolarized community, or it can be just neutral other. One of the practical examples, because sometimes we're using art methods in our dialogue work, and we've got a group of chaplains, and we ask them to draw the other, like who is the other, just when you first association when you've got. And one of the priests, he drew a total fog, so nothing is precise there. Someone is there. And then the next step, we asked, can you please change your picture in order to make the other as yours? So you know this person and you are taking him or her as your people. And this priest, he was drawing a real face of this fog, a cloud, and he said, people stopped being to me others when I know them in faces, when I know them personally. And it helps us a lot in case of polarization effects and especially conflict, because sometimes polarization effect works especially effectively when you don't understand how you're actually in there and with who you are fighting, or you are feeling that there is a group of someone who are getting any kind of aggression against you, or they've got any kind of threat, but you cannot name them. You don't know who are those people. Like, for example, on one of the protests, people covered with their faces, and you don't know who are those people and why they are there. And let's come more to the conflict. So, what associations you've got? And is it a taboo word, or it's more negative, positive? How do you feel? Even one word is enough. What do we mean by conflict? Yes. If a person is truly Catholic, there are no others. Yeah, maybe if you see such Catholic people, I would be happy to see them too, because I didn't see them in my life. Because you anytime get any kind of others, but not always in negative side. Those who you don't know. Like typically for Christian Muslim group, like Muslim activists would be others. Space to grow the conflict, disagreement between two groups of persons. Yeah. Let's keep with that, because actually that's a perfect associations for our next step. Thank you. So conflict, it's both threat and possibility. It's the same with polarization. First, it can be relationship destruction as a threat, because it's definitely disagreement and fight. Oh, thank you. Father Bede Grief. Sorry, my wording can be different. Griffiths as a perfect Catholic. So about the conflict, relationship destruction, loss, of property ownership, your own agency, that you do not feel yourself as legitimate representative, or you don't feel secured, as for example, you are attacked on a racial, religious, any kind of basis. Loss of your identity. If, for example, you lost your hometown, your home, your family members, you lost some institution you were attached to, or you are disappointed in something, that's part of the loss of identity and can be a really crucial one. It's also loss of opportunities for change, because sometimes you feel yourself limited and that you are stuck in a situation where you are. And of course, it's loss of social status and reputation, which is also harmful. But conflict as possibility, because according, there are two main theories in sociology about conflict. It can be destructive as a something that ruins, but it's also functional conflict, which helps you as a sign that something is wrong to get this opportunity for change. And for example, you can understand what was the reason of the conflict with your friend and to improve your relationships. Also, search for common ground, for common understanding, to find a new support, new resources, and of course, overcome the problem and transform the situation as itself. And it can be from personal level up to really worldwide, international, or national levels too. Or it can be on the level of church or mosque or synagogue, depending on community. So let's make a deep dive to the conflict. And sorry for the quality of the picture because it's quite old. But more interesting that if you understand the pin code of conflict, that can clarify you actually what's going on and how you can transform the situation. As you remember, icebergs are not seen, the whole ones, and the part which you can see above the water, that's a small one, but the biggest one is under the water. So here in the conflict, we've got precisely pin. We've got position above the water, interest and needs under the water. Positions, that's something that you declare. Like, for example, I agree with those people or I disagree. Like, for example, I know truly Catholic people who don't have others, or I disagree. It can be a small one example. But the more important, if you stick only to the position level and you say yes and no, you cannot make a room for dialogue and understanding with the other people. Yes. If we go to the under the water level, we've got interest and needs. Why do we need them? And what's the difference? Needs are more reflecting real understanding of what do we want. Because needs are the same for all people, but they got different priority examples. For some people, safety and security should be the first need now, because, for example, as for me, during the active phase of war, because without that, they cannot survive. But for others, in their personal point of life, it can be about connection, about support, about recognition, about friendship. They're also needs. But unfortunately, mainly, we do not speak about needs so much. And sometimes we do not understand in ourselves why it's so important for us. So interests are the strategies, how we satisfy our needs. As for example, I want recognition and I can work on my PhD or I can earn a lot of money through my career. I want to buy an expensive car and to get a superficial recognition from other people. But the need is the same. I want recognition, but my interest is the way how I would like to satisfy it. And when I got this conscious or unconscious strategy, I build up my position. Like, for example, I will defend my PhD thesis and I want to do it, and that's your clarification and declaration to the world, or it can be a different one. But in the conflict, when we got at least on the level of interest with both people or a group of people, it can be a lot of people involved, we need to understand what kind of strategies is about your position, and if it's possible to go deeply to the needs level to find some space of interaction. We typically do it in times of dialogue, as for example, recent developments about should we legalize weapon or not for civilians. as a typical American dialogue as well. And a part of dialogue there, we've got arguments for both sides. We also go to the question, why do you want to legalize or why you don't want to legalize weapon? And people saying about mainly security, safety, and also honesty in the law experience. So the needs are the same, but somehow they've got totally different strategies on how they satisfy the safety needs. And it's more important, as soon as we realize that we want the same, we want to be secured, we want to be a safe society, especially after the end of the war, we should clarify how we build our strategy and how we can work together on this issue in accordance to different research, statistics, and anything like that. So this PIN code is shortly like main findings of conflict studies for you in 5 minutes, which can help you to understand what's going on in the situation and also analyze yourself. And the main question, why I feel those emotions, why it's so important for me, and what actually I would like to achieve. That helps a lot, and sometimes it's really tricky to find the real interest and need behind it. So shortly about positions, they sound as ultimatum. So I would sit here or I will not stay if I'm not sitting here. It provides option rather yes and no. There are no like open questions. It may sound negative, like you will not do it. And it's impossible to move towards a agreement or any kind of joint steps together. Interests, strategy that we consciously and unconsciously decide for ourselves. Here we've got a zone for potential agreement already if two or more sides are sharing about their real interests. It's sometimes unpleasant to admit a voice. Like, for example, I want recognition, so I want you to recognize me as an expert. It's not comfortable for everyone to say, as one of the examples. And despite the same needs, as I mentioned, interest can be radically different, really opposite to each other. And needs, of course, that's a Maslow hierarchy of needs, which was criticized and again rehabilitated. Still, he's one of the main researchers on needs. And here you got all different levels and some of them, but more important on the critiques of Maslow pyramid, they can be on different direction. And especially for religious people, sometimes the spiritual need can be the first place priority, even before physical needs or safety needs. But mainly for all people, personal security, physical needs are the basics ones because you cannot live without them. And then you go move towards love, esteem, and self-actualization. So, any suggestions? What shows our needs? Why we need it? Why we have it as a mechanism? I know it can be hard. Any kind of suggestions? There are no right and wrong answers. Yeah, hard. Okay. So, how we recognize our needs? That's a Platchik wheel of emotions. Emotions are our natural mechanisms that show us that something is good or something is bad. And emotions are neutral, but we understand them as negative or positive depending on ourselves. And it can be as positive emotions that everything is good, you feel joy, calm, and it should be not like a real, I don't know, ecstasy or joy, like a really big one, because it's also a sign that something was dissatisfied and now you feel it. But it's also more stable conditions that you feel that everything is okay and I can keep calm and be relaxed in every moment. But when you've got any kind of negative emotions, it can be a really small one, irritation, I don't know, or some sadness, or some disgust, or you're just bored or annoyed by someone. That's a sign that something is wrong. So you can actually ask yourself, like, why I feel so? What's the real reason? It can be not like other person, but something that he or she is doing, something that touching your parts of identity, some kind of rituals. Like, for example, you don't like to eat on the street, I don't know, only on a table, as it can irritate you. So it's mainly about your signs that something is good or something is bad. As in, you can see here are different stages of emotion, even the same aggressiveness. If it's like complicated emotion of anger and anticipation, there are different levels because sometimes you can be irritated from the very beginning, but you can be really angry in the end if it doesn't stop. And if you feel more and more emotions, that's a sign for you to first name this emotion, and second, go deeply to yourself and ask yourself, why I'm doing it? What's the problem? Why I'm not stick to the calmness and relaxation? What's wrong? What I want to change? And that's a precise mechanism how in all the conflict work, all the mediators work with you. They're helping you to recognize emotions and they need to understand by themselves and then to move towards interests and needs. And it's also through group polarization, because sometimes they've got different kinds of emotion. For some of them, it can be fear, but for others, it can be anger. For those, why they're different groups and why they're trying to defend themselves. And of course, here's the practical task. Maybe we will not make it right now, but maybe it's more about homework for yourself. So you can think about a stressful situation or irritating situation you recently got and to understand who was involved, or yourself or your friends, I don't know, that depends on you. It can be your church community. And write down and to think, how would position sound? What is the real interest and need of those people? And is it any kind of zone of possible agreement or not? And you can also practice it for yourself just to get all those different levels of the pin code, just to understand how actually it works and how it can help you to explain what's going on. And I will share this presentation hopefully with Father Roman so you can understand and come back to all the pin codes. And here are the two main qualities we are practicing. And it's a good news that we can practice it and we can empower them: assertiveness and empathy. By assertiveness, we mean that you are able to protect your own interest. First, of course, to recognize, and then to protect yourself and to say, sorry, I'm not interested here. And you can say no without feeling guilty. And empathy, which is especially emphasized by all religious practices, that's ability to feel what other person feels. And it's important here not to save another person, but at least to feel other emotions. And of course, empathy starts with yourself because you need to understand what do you feel. And it's sometimes really harsh for adult people who never ask themselves, like, what do you feel right now? They just felt and they ran through it to get some work done or resolve some problems. And here you can start with self-empathy for yourselves. And getting more to this polarization in the second part on what to do actually, how to overcome it. Here I will use another theologian and conflict studies expert theory, John Paul Lederach, who is himself Mennonite, on conflict transformation theory. So his revolution in the end of 20th century was against the typical business approach in any kind of negotiation and conflict studies. He said, we shouldn't just resolve the conflict. We should transform it. And here comes the main question. What will be the next? What comes next? What should be changed as soon as we resolve the problem? What result do we want to see in 1 year, in 5 years, if we take in, for example, some polarization issue in countries like movement, for example, Black Lives Matters, and what do we want to achieve? What kind of society do we want to see in 10 years and for our kids? So it gets a generational even transformation. Of course, it can be a really small conflict if, for example, you got any kind of fight with your friend and you understand, okay, I don't want any fights in my future, and how I should transform this situation, how I can use my qualities not to get it like that. And there's a bittersweet lesson of John Paul Lederach, unfortunately, that maybe if we're working on some society level or a huge level or sometimes international, we will probably not see the results, because results of conflict transformation can be seen sometimes in 50 years. If, for example, you develop some educational program, which is for school or university degree, and you want to transform the narratives, the identity issues, the culture of communication among people, but you really need to wait for generational change. You need to wait while people are changing. Now, sometimes because of social media, it comes quickly, but every change takes time, and sometimes that's a lot of time. And for churches, we've got this proverb that church lives in centuries. So they are not in a big rush to change everything tremendously, especially on theological level. And here are the main priorities for conflict transformation. And first, for conflict transformation, there are different key parts. It's impossible to transform situation without truth, mercy, justice, forgiveness, and reconciliation as a result. But it's impossible sometimes, as some people say, you just need to show your mercy and everything will be fine. All those parts should be a part of conflict transformation. It's not possible to deal with reconciliation without naming the truth or getting any kind of justice, or at least understanding of the justice. And also forgiveness, which is quite complicated term, but also self-forgiveness is really important. And sometimes it's really complicated to forgive yourself, even though God forgives you. But it's important just to feel the part of this conflict transformation for yourself. And according to John Paul Lederach practice, because he worked in different contexts, there are several tracks of diplomacy, and it's more from typical diplomatic area. But anyway, he said, taking into account all those three tracks, the second track, where civil society leaders and church leaders are, is the most important because it's in the middle. Both civil society and church leaders can get to the top level of government, state, decision makers, business, any kind of, but they also keep the contact with the third track, with general people, with different part of social groups who actually get a lot of needs which are dissatisfied. So real peace builders can be on the second track, who keep the contact with all the layers and who understand and can analyze what actually can be done for change. Humility, yeah, agree, but that's according to John Paul. So let's work on his theory and get more. And you can also check his really good books about conflict transformation. It's like handbook on conflict transformation. It's really short one. But also I would like to recommend you two more. That's Reconcile and Reconciliation for Ordinary Christians. And a second one, that's Moral Imagination. It's more about theological and moral perspectives on how conflicts and war situation can be changed and how it's important to get all those parts. And Reconcile book, it's more about how to work with the Bible text on conflict transformation. And there are precise parts of the Bible which John Paul analyzes through the prism of conflict transformation theory. So my recommendation for you, home reading as soon as you get time. And of course, there are different challenges. And according to the polarization theory and practice, the main challenge is a lack of trust, that people do not trust that it's possible even to change something or it's possible to do anything good. And people are not ready for dialogue, because when we got this pin code for conflict, we need a readiness of people to step in, to be in a dialogue, to say about your emotions, about your feelings, about your interest, to get ready to hear the other side, which is really harsh. And also about 3D, that's especially important one. It's starting with depersonalization, when you've got not precise people, but a whole group. Like, for example, like all politicians are corrupted or police cannot be trusted, then you don't see any kind of personalities in this group. Then it comes delegitimization. It means like institutions are not legal so much. Like, for example, you don't believe that court system can help you or can protect your human rights. And the third one, it comes dehumanization. And the typical cases from Rwanda context, when people were called cockroaches, but not people, because it's really easy to fight with not people, not human beings, but to kill cockroaches. And in accordance to conflict transformation theory, what you can do with all those three effects, you don't need 3D, you need three rare, like rehumanization, re-legitimization, and repersonalization. You should see human beings, you should see some legal institution, and you should trust them and how to restore it if it's damaged. And also you can see personalities, but not the whole group, which leads you to polarization. And of course, this belief in success, that's especially important right now when a lot of people are disappointed and they don't think that it would work. And it's especially true when it comes to theology and churches, how to keep people's trust and how to be honest in different concerns and challenges we've got in everyday life in the modern societies today. And of course, main steps for transformation. Acknowledge the problem, as people say, that's 50% of the success already, as you can name it and you can be conscious about what's wrong. Then understand with empathy what actually going on with you or it was between two sides in some struggle, and build connections. Again, restoring trust and understanding how you can move together through this problem. Or, for example, if you cannot move together or cooperate, how at least you can live together without making harm, both moral, physical, any kind of violence, how you can live together and how you can achieve co-living. And a little bit about practices and tools that can be done in so-called restorative practices. By restorative practices, I mean these three rare effects: rehumanization, legitimization, and personalization, that you need to restore human dignity and you need to restore connections. And for example, that's a photo of one of our groups. You can see that's inter-Christian and if I'm not mistaken, it's Christian Muslim group. And here you've got representatives of non-believers too, Greek Catholic, Roman Catholic, different jurisdictions of Orthodoxy, Mormons, evangelicals, and the Muslim representatives. That's part of our dialogues, how we sit. And as you can see, by restorative practice, that's a circle so people can see each other and can see faces. If we're coming back to this polarization, other image, you see direct face and you connect with a personality in it. So that's all interest-based approach. Negotiation, it's more about how you negotiate about some deals and how to make as possible result for you as you want. Facilitation by facilitare, so it's making some process easier. Like, for example, this lecture, as I summarize you some theories of polarization and conflict transformation, is it's about how I facilitate your knowledge and understanding of this concept. Mediation is more precise. You typically got, starting with two sides, a whole procedure, how you move from understanding emotions, positions, interests, and needs, and how you can make a joint decision. And of course, dialogues and circles. Circles are a special, more, I would say, spiritual practice, where you've got a deep dive into values, into restoring each self-identity, and understanding how you can proceed together as community, or people would like to work with precise problem by themselves. And circles were designed for juvenile prevention of teenage crimes in Canada first, in the mid-20th century, and they were part of court system there, trying to get teenagers not imprisoned, but back to their communities to be as a part of, let's say, normal society. And also they were used at school a lot with school mediation. When you've got any kind of conflict between kids or kids and teachers, so you get their responsibilities, they can do what they really want to do with their conflict without adults. And that's more about their growing responsibility. So that's more you can actually see then about mediation and negotiation. We will not stop here. And also about dialogue is really a special and it's organized, facilitated tool. It's not like you just sit in a circle and talk about what you want. That's a precise design and precise procedure how you do it, and it should be full of safety, respect, if necessary, confidentiality, and also to think about balance of power. If we're coming back to the picture in the beginning of presentation, it should be balanced majority and minority. So minority doesn't feel themselves like harmed by being at the height of majority, and how they can be honest in their conversation and don't feel afraid of those others and to be punished after the dialogue ends. And more about religion, that's Clifford Geertz sociology quote here, that why religion is so important, why it plays a special role sometimes in uniting people or polarizing people, because it's a part of social order and how we see our values, our parts of society, and we understand that it's right and wrong, because all time religion gets influence on us. And that's a small part of religious responses from Ukrainian context. And here on a picture that's quite a meme, let's say so, theological almost. It's saying in Ukrainian, it's the end of air alarm, and Jesus like escaping the shelter. So that's everyday reflection on what we've got today. And religious responses, which are now really active, that's of course social ministry in all kinds of evacuation, shelter systems, psychological help, legal, humanitarian, all kinds of that. But also there's appeal and public diplomacy, which is done by all the Ukrainian Council of Churches and Religious Organizations mainly, that support for interreligious networks, because sometimes some Orthodox community got humanitarian aid, then evangelical, they've got a shelter, then Muslim people got a transport for vacation, and they cooperate together just to save people. And it's also an attempt, which is really important, to find any kind of modern theological explanation on what's going on. And that's a part of Theology After Bucha project, which was developed also together by Inter-Christian group. You can Google it and find some materials about. And the main parts for religious actors, what their special role, and also according to this pyramid of Ledrock, is that you can use religious organization as a strong connectors, and they can connect people and motivate them cooperate, but also religious rhetoric can be used in a different way, of course. And it's more important what kind of values and practices churches and not only all kind of religious organizations emphasize for their believers, and how they shape the image of group identity, and do they preach about the others, or do they preach about inside group values, beliefs, and practices? And it can be a really different focus. And for example, about religious component as connector, how it can be there. It's multi-religious balance, because there's quite hard to find only one religion country, of course, except Vatican, and also local ministers who are strong connectors, because sometimes they are the one people who get the highest reputation, the highest trust, and they're key connectors, those bridge people, if you remember from the picture, who can connect different sides, red and blue ones, to get them to common action. And demonstrative common action can be a prayer or a preach, or some good action as a volunteering, where you engaged people into your core values and rituals. And of course, the last and most important part, that creation of moral code. How we build this as, according to Geertz, cultural resource for social system, and how we move together through polarization, how we transform everyday reality, and how we get the best result. That's a little bit about our practical work as Dialogue in Action, and how we decided why we are there, because we are secular NGO, but working mainly with faith-based actors, and we precisely work with their requests and trying to engage them in civil society activities, and not to get churches and religious organizations separately from secular society. but to find some spots where they can cooperate and also try to work together precisely. So you can see all the different types of activities because we've got, and it's, for example, on the first photo, that's a group of military chaplains from different Christian confessions. And that's different confidential dialogue processes. And sometimes we've got, as for example, interpastoral dialogue, where only pastors from different Protestant communities coming, and they're talking about precise issues they've got, which they cannot talk about at home or at church. But that's a kind of safe space for them to talk about different taboos and how to respond to them. There are also different educational programs and all the types of dialogues and also youth work. And of course, ongoing research. One of it that's about religious coping, how people who experience war trauma, understanding this trauma through their beliefs and how through their beliefs they can cope with it. Because it's a part not only by psychological aid, by spiritual aid too, and how all the ministers can support this process of healing and recovery. And it's shortly about our work, but I don't want to take a lot of time and save some time for questions. And you can see on these pictures, it's a typical group we've got, and I really like this cooperation we have. So that's some small parts of our work as well. So you can see all the different representatives. And I have the main question for you where I will stop and open a discussion and question and answers. So how a church can transform polarization? How do you see those practical steps in your context, in your home, and how you can see what should be done or what shouldn't be done, and how after this new parts of polarization theory and practice, you can see some responses. Thank you for your attention.